The night was cold in New York. The city lights shone like chaotic stars, reflecting on the sidewalks wet from the recent rain. Among the hurried pedestrians, a figure moved discreetly, hidden under a cap and a loose coat. Taylor Swift loved this feeling of anonymity. In moments like this, she could simply exist, without camera flashes or security guards lurking. She walked unhurriedly, letting her feet guide her with no certain destination. After exhausting days of rehearsals, meetings, and endless commitments, all she wanted was a moment of peace. The weight of fame was a burden that few understood. The glow of the stage was hypnotizing, but when the lights went out, the loneliness became deafening. It was then that she spotted a small diner on the corner, one of those old places that seemed frozen in time. A jukebox leaned against the wall, worn red leather booths, and a comforting aroma of coffee and apple pie filled the air. A perfect refuge. Taylor pushed the door open, and the bell at the top of the entrance jingled softly. Only a few customers occupied the scattered tables, and a young waiter wiped the counter with a tired look. He seemed to be at the end of his shift, but maintained a polite, albeit discreet, smile. She chose a table in the corner near the window. Outside, the rain began to fall again in fine droplets, shining under the streetlights. The waiter approached with an order pad and a pencil balanced behind his ear. "Good evening. What can I get for you?" Taylor looked at the menu for a moment but already knew the answer. "An iced tea, please." The waiter raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Iced tea on a cold night?" She gave a slight smile without lifting her gaze. "Sometimes you just need something familiar." The waiter did not respond immediately, as if trying to decipher the meaning behind the words. Finally, he nodded and wrote down the order. As she waited, Taylor rested her elbows on the table and let her eyes wander around the small restaurant, her gaze fixed on the details: the waitress in the background collecting empty plates, the barista cleaning the coffee machine, an elderly couple sharing a slice of pie in comfortable silence. Simple moments, true moments. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. She did not know yet, but that ordinary moment was about to become unforgettable. Ethan adjusted his apron and looked at the clock hanging on the wall. Only a few minutes remained until the end of his shift. Fatigue weighed on his shoulders, but he was already used to this routine. Working at the diner was not exactly what he had dreamed of for his life, but for now it was what paid the bills and kept his small collection of guitars at home. He glanced at the new customer sitting in the corner of the restaurant. Something about her intrigued him. Maybe it was the way she kept her eyes fixed on the window, as if lost in distant thoughts. Or maybe it was that strange choice of ordering iced tea on a cold night. He went back behind the counter and began preparing the order, still reflecting on her. There was something familiar about that face, but Ethan could not pinpoint exactly what it was. "Here you go," he said, as he returned to her table, placing the glass of tea on the checkered tablecloth. The woman lifted her eyes and smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Thank you." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then leaned slightly forward, as if he could not contain his curiosity. "You don't seem to be from around here." She stirred the straw in her tea unhurriedly and took a small sip before answering. "I come to New York all the time, but I guess lately I haven't been paying attention to it." He nodded, understanding the feeling. How many times had he caught himself living on autopilot? "Well, you chose a great place for a break," he said, looking around. "Small, kind of old-fashioned, but it has its own magic." She let out a light laugh. "I like places like this. Places that tell stories." That phrase echoed in Ethan's mind as he returned to the counter. He picked up a cloth and started cleaning a cup, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Stories. That was exactly why he loved music, to tell stories that in some way could make people feel something real. But lately, that dream seemed unreachable. He looked at the woman once more, trying not to stare. Who was she? Something in her posture, in the way she spoke, seemed full of experiences he would never live. Without realizing it, Ethan murmured a snippet of a melody he had composed days ago, an idea that had come to him during a sleepless night, but that he had never finished. "Is that song yours?" Her voice caught him by surprise. He looked up. She was watching him, her eyes attentive, curious. "Ah, yes, it's just a draft," he replied, scratching his neck. She tilted her head slightly, showing interest. "Can I hear it?" Ethan chuckled awkwardly. "I don't know, it's kind of silly." "I like silly songs." The unexpected encouragement made his chest tighten. Why did the opinion of this stranger matter so much? He took the phone out of his pocket and found the recording. He pressed play. His voice sounded a little uncertain, but the notes were sincere. It was a song about time, about chasing dreams that always seemed too far away. The woman listened carefully. When the music ended, she smiled again, but this time there was something different in her gaze. "You have talent," she said simply. Ethan lowered his eyes, embarrassed. "I think the industry wouldn't agree with you," he replied with a half-smile. She rested her arms on the table and said in a calm tone, "Sometimes not being noticed at first means you still have the chance to find your own voice." Ethan was speechless for a moment. There was something in those words that felt much deeper than he expected, as if she was speaking from the experience of someone who had been exactly where he was. But before he could ask anything else, the diner door opened and a cold wind entered along with a new customer. Ethan sighed, returning to work. But something inside him told him that this night was far from ordinary. Ethan felt something strange in his chest. It wasn't nervousness nor exhaustion, but that unsettling feeling that something important was happening, and he didn't quite know what it was. The woman was still there, stirring the straw in her iced tea, watching the diner's movement as if she were in another time, another place. Her gaze wasn't just distracted, it was nostalgic. Ethan had served all kinds of customers in that restaurant. But this woman was different. She spoke with a calmness that didn't seem forced, like someone who had been through many storms and now knew exactly when to let the rain fall. The phrase she had said kept echoing in his head. Sometimes, not being noticed at first means you still have the chance to find your own voice. That was exactly the insecurity that had haunted him. Forever. He tried, worked hard, sent songs to record labels that never responded. Should he just give up? Grabbing a cloth, Ethan slowly wiped the counter, trying to organize his own thoughts. But without realizing it, his eyes returned to the woman in the corner. Who was she? Taylor felt the waiter's gaze on her, but pretended not to notice. She recognized that sparkle in his eyes. The sparkle of someone who had a dream, but didn't know if they had the strength to keep fighting for it. It was a sparkle she had once had. Her fingers touched the side of the glass, feeling the cold temperature of the glass. Her mind took her back to a small cafe in Nashville many years ago. She remembered the smell of coffee mixed with the sound of silverware clinking against plates and the muffled hum of overlapping conversations. She was sitting on the improvised stage of the Bluebird Cafe, holding her guitar, as if it were her only protection against the world. Back then, no one knew her name. She was just a blonde girl with a guitar, trying to be heard. The first notes of the song came out hesitant, as if asking for permission to exist. People talked, laughed, drank their coffee, not caring about the girl on stage. She had no spotlights, no security, nothing but her lyrics and melody. But in the middle of the crowd, one man was paying attention. Scott Borchetta, the producer who would later give her the first big opportunity of her career. If he hadn't listened, if he hadn't seen something, In her, maybe nothing would have happened. And now, sitting in that diner, Taylor wondered if that young waiter in front of her was also waiting for someone to see him. She picked up the straw and took a sip of her iced tea. The nostalgia weighed on her, but not in a bad way. She knew exactly what she needed to do. Ethan remained behind the counter, wiping the same glass for the third time. He couldn't stop looking at the mysterious woman. He felt ridiculous for caring so much. But somehow, this interaction felt different. Then, as if the universe had decided to test his courage, he took a deep breath and approached the table again. "So, what did you think of my song?" he asked, pretending indifference, but secretly hoping for an honest answer. The woman gave a slight smile and set her glass aside. "I think it sounded sincere. And sincerity is what makes a song unforgettable." Ethan was surprised by the response. He expected an "I liked it" or an "it's good," but this response was different. "Do you really think so?" he asked, uncertain. She nodded. "Music is more than notes and lyrics. It's about feeling something. If you feel it, other people will feel it too." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the manager. "Ethan, your shift ended 10 minutes ago. You can go home." He nodded quickly, but couldn't help but sigh. When he looked back at the table, he saw that the woman was also standing up, grabbing her coat. "Looks like we both finished for today," she said, adjusting the collar of her coat. Ethan stood up and hesitated for a moment, then extended his hand. "My name is Ethan." The woman looked at his hand, and for a moment she seemed to ponder whether she should shake it. Then, with a slight smile, she accepted the handshake. "Taylor." Ethan blinked. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't immediately connect the dots. "Nice to meet you, Taylor." She just smiled and left the diner. Ethan stood still for a moment, as if trying to absorb what had just happened. He had no idea that on that night, his life was about to change forever. The doorbell jingled softly as Taylor left the diner. Ethan watched as she walked down the sidewalk, disappearing among the few pedestrians still braving the cold night. He felt like he should have said something more. Their conversation had been brief, but it had left a mark. There was something in her words, in the way she spoke about music, that felt deeper than just a casual chat with a random customer. The manager appeared behind him, tapping lightly on the counter. "Are you still here? Your shift is over, kid." Ethan let out a short laugh. "I know. I don't know." The manager raised an eyebrow. "You don't know what?" Ethan shrugged. "Forget it. Good night, boss." He grabbed a cloth to clean the table that Taylor had occupied before leaving. But when he pulled the empty glass and the plate with a small puddle of melted ice, something caught his attention. A white envelope, carefully folded, was underneath the glass. Ethan frowned and picked up the paper. At first, he thought it was just a simple receipt left behind by an absent-minded customer, but as he opened the envelope, he realized it was something very different. Inside, there was a small handwritten note. "Never stop playing. Music finds those who need to hear it. The stage is still waiting for you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He reread the sentence a few times, trying to absorb the meaning. The words were direct, yet they carried weight. A weight he couldn't quite explain. Next to the note inside the envelope was something even more unexpected. A generous tip, larger than any he had ever received. Ethan blinked, incredulous. Why would that woman, Taylor, do this? His fingers tightened around the paper, trying to understand the reason behind the message. And that was when he realized. Taylor. His brain finally connected the dots. The way she talked about music, the way she seemed to understand his frustration better than anyone. The name she had given before leaving, Taylor Swift. Ethan held his breath. His eyes went back to the note. Now every word took on a new meaning. Never stop playing. The stage is still waiting for you." His heart pounded against his chest. He looked around as if suddenly expecting someone to confirm the craziness of what was happening. But the diner was empty, except for the manager, who was closing the register without paying attention. Ethan looked toward the door, but Taylor was already gone. He didn't know how, but one of the biggest music stars in the world had just sat in his restaurant, listened to his music, and left a note telling him not to give up. The weight of that thought hit him like an avalanche. Was this a sign? Maybe he was overreacting, but what if he wasn't? The note in his hands seemed to carry something more than ink and words. He felt a lump in his throat. For so long he had doubted himself, doubted his music. But if Taylor Swift thought he had something special, who was he to disagree? Ethan carefully folded the note and placed it in his jacket pocket as if it were a precious talisman. He didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain. He could no longer ignore his dream. Ethan left the diner, feeling the cold wind hit his face, but the temperature seemed insignificant compared to the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. He held the folded note in his jacket pocket, as if it were a precious secret, something that for some reason he wasn't ready to share with the world just yet. Everything felt surreal. Taylor Swift had been there, sitting at one of the tables in that old-fashioned restaurant, listening to his words, hearing his music, and in the end, leaving a message that echoed inside him almost deafeningly. He walked aimlessly for a few minutes, trying to process what it all meant. What exactly had she meant? Was it just a kind gesture? Or had she really seen something in him, something he couldn't even see in himself? His heart raced as he reread the words on the note. "Never stop playing. Music finds those who need to hear it. The stage is still waiting for you." He took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs. Should he tell someone? Part of him wanted to shout it to the world, post a photo, and tell everyone that Taylor Swift believed in him, but another part hesitated. This wasn't just an impressive story to get likes on the internet. This was personal. When he got home, the apartment was silent except for the low sound of the TV in the living room. His roommate Kyle was asleep on the couch with a video game controller lying beside him. Ethan walked straight to his room, locked the door, and sat on the bed. He pulled the note from his pocket and stared at it for long seconds, feeling a new weight on his shoulders. Somehow, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the persistent sound of notifications on his phone. He frowned, still groggy from sleep, and picked up the device. Messages flooded the screen. Friends, acquaintances, and even unknown numbers all asking the same thing. "Dude, is this real?" He blinked, confused, until Kyle appeared at his bedroom door, holding his phone and widening his eyes. "Dude, you're everywhere." Ethan sat up abruptly. "What?" Kyle tossed the phone to him, and he caught it mid-air. On the screen, a post showed a picture of his note. The caption read, "Taylor Swift leaves a mysterious message for an unknown musician. Who is the lucky one?" Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. How had this ended up on the internet? He scrolled frantically. Someone, probably a customer at the diner, had taken a picture of the note before he grabbed it. Now, the image was circulating on fan pages, music forums, and even small news blogs. In the comments, people speculated about who could have received the message. Is this real? Sounds like something Taylor would do. Imagine being this musician and having that note. I would faint. If this person doesn't post anything, it means they never really wanted a music career. I'd make an entire album based on this. Ethan felt his throat go dry. He didn't know what to do. "You have to say something," Kyle said excitedly. "Everyone wants to know who got that note." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, trying to calm his mind. What should he do? He didn't want to seem like someone who was using this to promote himself, but he also didn't want to let the story get out of his control. The note was his. What Taylor wrote was for him. Now it felt like it belonged to the whole world. He went to work that morning, but everything felt different. As he walked into the diner, he felt curious eyes on him. Some customers whispered, while others pretended not to notice and continued their meals. His manager gave him an amused look and crossed his arms. "So, want to tell me what it was like serving an iced tea to Taylor Swift?" Ethan swallowed hard and let out a nervous chuckle. I don't even know what to say." "Well, I hope you made a good impression. It might come in handy." The comment echoed in his mind for the rest of the day. Should he take advantage of this chance? But how? When he got home that night, he threw himself onto his bed and stared at the ceiling. He grabbed his phone and opened the Notes app. He started typing a message, but deleted it right away. He opened the camera, recorded a 2-second video, and erased it. He took a deep breath and picked up the note once again. He stared at the words Taylor had written, and at that moment he realized the decision had already been made. He couldn't ignore this anymore. He couldn't pretend it was just another moment. If Taylor Swift thought he had something special, who was he to doubt it? Ethan knew what he had to do. Ethan stayed awake all night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Taylor Swift's note in his mind, like a call he couldn't ignore. Since he was a child, he had dreamed of making a living from music, but years of rejection had chipped away at his confidence. Now, he had something he never imagined. Someone who truly believed in him. Someone who knew what it meant to fight for a dream. He got up before dawn and picked up his phone. The screen was still full of notifications. The note had gone viral in a way he never expected. People from all over the world were commenting, asking questions, hoping the mysterious musician would show up. Taking a deep breath, he opened the recording app. He couldn't avoid this anymore. If the story was already out there, then he would do it his way. The camera turned on, and he saw himself on the screen. His face looked tired, but there was a new determination in his eyes. "Hey, I'm Ethan," he started hesitantly. "And I think I have something to share." He told the story calmly, without exaggeration. He said he had worked at the diner for years and had always wanted to be a musician, but never had the courage to truly believe in it. He talked about the quiet night, the mysterious woman ordering iced tea, and how he only realized later that it was Taylor Swift. And then he held the note up to the camera. "She left me this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And honestly, I still don't quite know how to process it. But there's one thing I do know. I can't ignore my dream anymore." He hesitated for a moment, then picked up the guitar beside him. "So, this is a song I wrote. Maybe it would have never left my notebook if that night hadn't happened. But now, I think I need to play it." His fingers glided over the strings, and the soft melody filled the silence. The song was sincere, raw, full of emotion. It was about finding hope when everything seemed impossible, about holding onto a tiny spark of courage and finally letting it shine. When the last note faded into the air, Ethan lowered his head, taking a deep breath. "That's it, I hope that it reaches someone who needs to hear it." He stopped the recording and stared at the screen. For a moment he wanted to delete everything, but then he looked at the note once again and knew he couldn't go back. With one last deep breath, he clicked publish. The video was live, and now everything was out of his control. Ethan dropped his phone onto the bed and lay beside it, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. The video was live. There was no turning back. For months, years, he had hidden behind the idea that he wasn't good enough, that his music would never go anywhere. But now he had exposed his truth to the world, and he had no idea what would come next. The minutes passed slowly. First, a few likes. Then, the first comments. Within an hour, the views had passed the thousands. People from different parts of the world were commenting, encouraging, praising his voice, his songwriting, the courage to share that moment. Dude, this is beautiful. Never stop playing. That note was meant for you. This song is special. If even Taylor Swift believes in you, who are we to disagree? Ethan read every message, feeling a lump in his throat. He had never received so much support in his life, but still, a part of him tried to stay realistic. Going viral on the internet didn't mean real success. The next day he could be forgotten, replaced by the next trend. But then, something happened that he could never have predicted. The phone vibrated beside him, and he picked it up without thinking. The notification was for a single like on his video. But it wasn't just from any account. It was from Taylor Swift. Ethan sat down so quickly that he almost knocked the phone to the floor. His mind refused to believe what he was seeing, but there was no doubt. Taylor Swift had watched the video. His heart felt like it was about to explode. He stared at the screen, trying to absorb what it meant. But before he could fully process it, a new notification appeared. Taylor Swift commented on your video. Ethan blinked several times, thinking he was hallucinating. With trembling hands, he opened the post and saw her response. Always trust your music. I'm listening to you. The world around him stopped. The comments exploded within seconds. Taylor's fans went crazy, reposting the video, spreading the story. Taylor Swift's message validated everything. She didn't just remember that night, she actually listened to his music. Ethan let the phone drop onto the mattress, burying his face in his hands. This wasn't a dream. He was awake, and Taylor Swift was telling him to keep going. The phone started ringing. He looked at the screen, still in shock. It was Kyle. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!" His friend's voice screamed from the other side of the line. "Did you see it? Did you see what just happened?" Ethan laughed, still unable to process it. "I saw it. Taylor Swift responded to you, man. This isn't just some internet viral moment. This is real." Ethan ran a hand over his face, trying to catch his breath. "What do I do now?" Kyle scoffed, incredulous. "What do you do now? You take this moment and run with it. You post more music, record an album, show up in interviews. Man, your life just changed." Ethan looked at the ceiling, feeling a new weight settle over him. He knew Kyle was right. This wasn't just a fleeting moment. This was an opportunity he could never afford to waste. So, without hesitation, he picked up his guitar again and pressed record. His journey was just beginning. In the days that followed, Ethan's life completely transformed. His video kept going viral, and the support he received was overwhelming. Not just Taylor Swift's fans, but independent musicians, everyday people who connected with his story, and even small music blogs that praised the sincerity of his music. Amid the avalanche of attention, Ethan decided to do what he knew best: play. He started posting videos daily, sharing both old and new compositions, unafraid to show his truth. Each song was a piece of his journey, a reflection of his experiences, struggles, and dreams. But nothing prepared him for the message he received 1 week later. It was from a representative of Taylor Swift's team, inviting him to a meeting. Ethan's heart pounded as he read the email. It was surreal to think that, not long ago, he was serving coffee and cleaning tables, and now he was being noticed by one of the biggest artists in the world. On the day of the meeting, Ethan walked into the studio with trembling hands, but a heart full of hope. He was welcomed by a warm team who listened to him attentively, praising his compositions and authenticity. At the end of the meeting came the surprise, an invitation to open one of Taylor Swift's tour shows. Ethan could barely believe it. He accepted immediately, feeling the dream that once seemed so distant finally within his reach. On the night of the art show, he was nervous, but when he stepped onto the stage and saw the crowd, an unexpected calm washed over him. This was the opportunity he had always wished for, and he wasn't going to waste it. With his guitar in hand, he began playing the song he had written that night in the diner. The same one Taylor had heard, and now it was being shared with thousands of people. As the notes echoed through the stadium, he felt at home. At the end of the performance, Taylor welcomed him backstage with a warm hug and a sincere smile. "I knew you had something special," she said. "Never stop playing, Ethan. The world needs your music." And for the first time, he believed it. In the following months, Ethan released his first EP, participated in podcasts and interviews, and built a loyal fan base. But more than that, he learned to believe in himself, to recognize the value of his music, and the importance of pushing forward, even when everything seemed difficult. Taylor Swift's note remained tucked in his wallet, a constant reminder that small acts of kindness can change lives. And in every show he played, in every song he performed, Ethan carried that message forward. Shining on stage, he knew this was just the first note of a long and promising journey.